Recently, I've been trying to get into Rust and understand how it works and how to use it as a programming language because it seems really interesting to me to have a systems programming language like C++ or C, but it also has all of these cool features like its own package manager and seemingly a nicer ecosystem and all kinds of web support. Everyone's excited about Rust, it seems like, and I just have to get in on it. So this week I did my best to learn a little bit about Rust, and I guess I'll share that with you now for whatever it's worth. So first of all, how do you install Rust? It's really easy. You can literally just Google install Rust and click the first link and it gives you this. For me at least, on Ubuntu, they also have installers for whichever platform you can think of. So that's straightforward. You just copy and paste. Now, where do we start with Rust? I tried skimming the Rust book, which is supposed to be the absolute reference for Rust. And I don't disagree. It's very comprehensive and pretty awesome. But it also seems not the kind of thing that you would skim, right? You really have to dive in. And for example, this chapter 12, I tried looking through it a couple times without doing the code as I went, and it just didn't work. It didn't sink in at all. This is the type of book where you have to have the terminal open, you have to have the Rust file open, and you have to be running it as you go, or else you're just not going to get it. At least for me, that's how it worked. There's also another reference called the Rust by example. Yeah, so just Google Rust by example and you'll find it, and there's all kinds of examples that you can do rather than going through the Rust book, which is very theory heavy. So both of those are good, but I actually was Googling to try to figure out how I can build a command line application, process some arguments, and I was going to create a clone of cat, like the thing that just prints files on Linux. But lo and behold, there is actually an entire chapter in the Rust book dedicated to building an IO platform, or an IO program that does exactly that. And they took it one step further than I was even going to take it. Rather than cat, they made a minigrep, grep being the thing that searches in files on Linux. So really great chapter. I learned a lot from this chapter, and if you go into the source code, now that I'm finished, I'll show you it's 19 lines for the main file, and then you end up with about 92 lines, including tests. These are all tests right here in the lib file. So I guess I'll go through, and I don't know if this is that valuable. You can definitely go read this yourself and probably get more out of it. But if you want to follow along, we can just start from zero and walk through this chapter because it was pretty useful for me. So I wanted to document it and, share things that I learned. So before we do that, we can check out what it does. There's this poem that they provide to you, and if you do a cargo run, it's going to run your program, and you provide what you're searching for, nobody, and then the file, poem.txt, and there are 2 lines that match, so it only prints those lines. And they also implement a case insensitive. I think it's just yes. So you can toggle case sensitivity using an environment variable. So that's it. That's the whole program right there. But the process that they take you through is pretty awesome. It's like it shows you how to, first of all, just do something in the main function. And then a lot of the tutorial is how to refactor into separate functions and eventually a separate file, lib.rs, and then how to use test-driven development to drive your development, which I'm huge on, which I think is awesome. Test-driven development is it. There's still a lot in here that I don't understand. I don't really get the whole ownership indicator things, the little tick marks, but I guess there's a lot to learn with Rust, but this breaks in a little bit. So let's get into how to get to this point, and I'll just run through this tutorial, and I'll definitely leave a link if you want to just go through it yourself, but maybe you like to watch someone do it. So yeah, we can get into it. So here I am in a fresh folder, and I'm going to do a cargo new minigrep. Actually, first let's actually walk through the tutorial. So we'll get past the intro page, and yes, that's exactly what it's telling us to do. Cargo new minigrep, cd minigrep, and you can cargo run, and it does nothing but say hello world. You can also run it with arguments, search string, example file name.txt, and it still does the exact same thing. So the first thing, we have to read some argument values. So if we go in here and replace this, args is a vector of strings, env args. So the env args is an iterator, and then if you do .collect, it turns it into a vector so that you can use it. It's kind of like Python iterators, I guess. And then we can just print the value of args out. And then we use standard env. And there we go. We get the thing that we use to invoke, and then we get our arguments. So the 0th one, or the first one there, is always the program itself. So you can change things if you want, and that's about it. And then how do we put the arguments into variables? That's the next move. So you could do ampersand args of 1, file name, ampersand args of 2. So with that, we can print this out, and it says we're searching for search string in example file name. So that's perfect. As far as why the ampersand, I'm guessing that's because it's a reference, kind of like C. I'm not entirely sure. So how do we read from a file? So I guess we can use their poem.txt again, paste that in there, and then we're going to use the standard libraries fs for file system, and below this we insert let contents equals file system, read to string, file name, and then it's returning a result with the string. So we can do .expect something went wrong reading the file. And this is saying take the result here, which contains what we actually want in it, and you can't use that result directly. You have to do something with it to handle it, because it can be okay and return what we want, or it can be an error. So .expect says if there was an error, panic, crash the program, write this message. Otherwise, set contents to the return value that we wanted. So now, assuming everything went well, contents is set to that string, and we can print the line with text. So yeah, we panicked. It said something went wrong reading the file, and we get this big ugly error, right? Because example file is not a real file. If we change it to poem.txt, which should be a real file, then we get it printing out with text, and it prints the file. So that's perfect. And that's it. It's just talking about results and all that. So now it starts refactoring, where we're going to move things into separate functions and all that stuff. And I would definitely recommend just reading this, because it's going to say it a lot better than I can. But as far as what exactly do we type, we're going to create this parse config function, and we can just move this stuff on down, or at least this part, the query and the file name, and then we're going to return them as a tuple. And when you don't have the semicolon on the last one, that indicates that that's what you're returning. So if we had this here, it wouldn't be the same, because it would be assuming that you're returning unit at the end. You're returning just blank, right? Or return null, or whatever you want to call it. No matter what, that last line there is going to be your return value. So we definitely want to return query and file name. And of course, you're indicating that you're returning a tuple of 2 strings. So it would have had an error if we did that. In fact, we could, first of all, let's take care of up here. You could say let query file name equal parse config args. So this should be okay. Still runs. If we put a semicolon here, I think it'll crash. Yep. So that's important. Yeah. Found empty. So it implicitly put this here because it's looking for what doesn't have a semicolon. That's our return value. If it's not there, it just inserts this. So that's a good one to know if you didn't know that before. So that's all for that code snippet. What next? So now, instead of doing the tuple, they define a struct config so that you're actually naming these fields instead of returning a random tuple, which doesn't have too much information in it. So parse config is now going to return a config struct, and then we return config query file name. And for some reason we're cloning these, and it says that it has something to do with the ownership of data. I don't pretend to understand this at all, but hey, I guess we got to clone our arguments, and someday maybe I'll understand why. But either way, this is going to be let config now, parse config arguments, and then we just do config.query, config.filename, same thing again, and then the contents. So that should work. Aha! Okay, yeah, so this is a mistake I made before. We got to get rid of this ampersand. I don't know why. But we're cloning now, we're not ampersanding. So I guess instead of grabbing the reference, we're creating a new reference. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. I'm just trying to figure this stuff out. Okay, what's next? So now we're basically gonna add a constructor for config. So we have implementation, I guess, of config. I don't understand why this is separate from the struct, but inside of it we have a new, and we provide args, is a list of string references, I guess, and then we return a config from it. And then we're just going to take this and put it in here, and that's the only difference. So it's just more idiomatic, I guess. So now up here we can do config new args, and hopefully that also works the same. Yep. Okay, so it's saying now if you do cargo run with not enough variables, you get an ugly Rust error. So it's an index out of bounds error. So they're just saying we can do our own error checking and provide a nicer message. So if args.len less than 3, we're going to panic. And panic, remember, it's kind of like expect, except it's directly saying right now panic, rather than if we get an error, we're going to panic. So this is directly telling it to panic and say not enough arguments. So flame out completely. And now we do get a panic with not enough arguments. Perfect. So now it's saying it would be best if we didn't panic because it really is not a nice message that it's returning. So instead we're going to return a result. So finally we're breaking into returning our own results. Now the single tick static, I have no clue what that means. It's something to do with scope or ownership or something, I don't know. And then instead of panicking, we're going to return an error that says not enough arguments. And then whoever's calling this function has to handle that. Down here, we're just going to wrap our original return value in an OK, which can be unwrapped up top too. And then if we go up here, yes, we can .expect and that'll work. Whoa. Panicked at whoa. Okay, so yeah, but there's a better way, and that is unwrap or else, which is a similar concept to, I didn't understand this when I started, but now I get that it's kind of like expect, and you, instead of just panicking automatically, you get this error and you can do whatever you want with it. So we're going to print line problem parsing arguments. And then we process exit 1. So that's a lot like sys in Python, where you can just exit with an exit code. And so yeah, let's see how that works. Oops, forgot a semicolon. And then it says problem parsing arguments. Nice. So, and I think if we want to get rid of all that extra text, we can just run the target ourselves. There we go. So it is building it and putting it there and then running it for us all in one step, thanks to Cargo being pretty awesome. So, and if we echo the return value, it was a 1. So if we change this to like 123, we should see that change. Oh, hold on. Not enough arguments. And it's 123 now. So you can see where that's coming from. So now it's saying it wants to take all of the main logic out of main and instead put it in this run function, which we can eventually put into a separate file and also test separately. So all these guys are going to go down and we're just going to pass run config. Should work the same. Not enough arguments. And there we go. So everything's working, returning errors from the run function. So this is a similar conversion that we just did before. We can do result of unit, which is just nothing. Everything went well. And then a box dynamic error. And it tells us that this box just means that it's something that is going to subclass error, I believe. That might not be the right terminology, but to me, that was the message that I got. So we are either returning a result with nothing or some subclass of error, but we're not going to say what type. Now we can get rid of expect and then put the question mark at the end, and then that's going to automatically bubble up that error if it occurs. Otherwise, it's going to just continue. So read to string returns a result that is either an error or okay. So if it's okay, we continue. If it's not okay, this question mark tells us to just return the error, I guess, or bubble it up somehow. And then at the end there, we have to do okay with the unit return value, the basically null return value. And I think it'll run. Oh, we got an error. I did not import standard error. Okay, so that works. And then it says that there's a warning. Result must be used, and I guess it tells us how to fix that. Okay, this is where it gets kind of funky. If let error of e equals run config, and then we have this block if we get an error, which the syntax is a little confusing to me, but I guess it makes intuitive sense. Application error e, and then we exit 1. How did we get the error? Oh, if we can't read the file. Okay, let's see if we can make that happen. So that works fine. And if we try to read poem2.txt, application error, no such file or directory, OSR2. Perfect. And then do we get our own personal error code as well? Yes, we get 123. So we're definitely exiting right here and handling the error in that way. So that's good. So now things get real because we're going to separate into lib.rust. So it says to create a new file, lib.rs, and then basically just take everything here except main and stick it in that file. And then we need to sort out which imports are which. So I think we need, error. Oh, it tells us. We need error and we need file system. Makes sense. And then the other change is that we're going to add public to a lot of this stuff. So public run, public struct config, implementation config, but new is also public, and also the parts of config, pub query, pub file name, and just to match what they have, I'm going to move run to the bottom. So we sprinkle a lot of pub everywhere. And then in the main file, we can call that using, instead of run, we're going to do minigrep run, which is cool. It's our project name already in scope. And then we can use minigrep config. And then that lets us use this config here. So I guess that's two ways of importing. You can use it up here and then just go for it, or you can use the full name. Pretty neat. And then I think it should still work. Application error. And then that part works. Good. Okay, so we're moving along. Okay, now we get into the test-driven development, which is pretty cool stuff. So, and we can do it all in the source file. I'm not sure if I love the fact that it's all right in the source file here, but maybe it'll grow on me. I'm used to having separate files for tests, but I don't know if that's just for this tutorial or if it's how it's done in Rust. But we're running a test that fails for one result. So we're saying if we call it with duct and the file contents happen to be Rust, safe, fast, productive, pick all three. Notice that easy is not one of those three. So we assert equal vector, safe, fast, productive, search, query, contents. And then this isn't even going to compile because there's no search function yet. Oh, we got to say cargo test, and it doesn't even work. So it's saying just put a little stub in here for the search function. And again, the tick marks, I'm not too sure on, but someday it'll be clear to me. We're just going to return a vector. No semicolon because it's what we're returning. And then still can't build. Yes, I used the wrong variable name. Okay, the test failed. Yeah, I typoed. Should have been contents. Okay, what's next? How do we make this pass, I guess? So we're going to implement our search function. And we'll say for line and contents lines, if line.contains query results.push line, and we have to define results to be, this is cool. So I guess everything is immutable by default. All variables are final basically. But if you use mutable, then you have a mutable variable that you could change. So we're going to create a new vector, and then we're going to push the line. I guess we don't even have to say the type of the vector, which is pretty nice. And then we return results, our vector. How about now? Now it passes. Beautiful. So now we can actually get some functionality out of this thing. Instead of printing with text, we can say for line in search config.query contents print line the line, and then we're done. And then it also says, I think, to delete all of those extra print lines in main, like this and this and this, that aren't errors. The test works. Run works because search is not in our poem, but if we search for something like in, aha, cool. So it actually works. I think that's it. Okay, so the next thing it does is you can add the environment variable really quickly to search case insensitive, which I guess would also be a flag on the command line typically, but they want to show us how to use environment variables, which is nice. So this is case sensitive search. We're renaming that test, and we're also adding duct tape to it so that we can see that it is case sensitive. So if we do cargo test, it should still pass because we're searching for a lowercase duct, which is right here, and we don't get the uppercase duct. So now we write the test case for case insensitive. RUST. Trust me. Okay. So we're saying we get two results here if we search case insensitive with those variables. And this isn't going to compile because it's not seeing that function. And it says if you want to, and I want to, you can add a little stub method like we did before. So we'll just say case insensitive. And I guess we need the same signature with the A and all that stuff. It's going to be the same. It says I think this A marker, it's like marking the lifetime of the variable. I don't really know what that means, but it's saying the contents, the file contents lifetime, I guess, of the memory matches the output lifetime. I guess by default it would be the query, or by default maybe it requires you to specify. I don't really know. Either way, I think we just do the vec, right? And then it failed. Good, but it did compile. So now it gives us the case-insensitive implementation. We convert the query to lowercase, create the vector like before for each line, and then we check the lowercase line against our lowercase query, and then we push results if that's the case, and return results. So we have that done. The test passes, and our main program still works. Okay, so now we're going to add case sensitive as a bool to our config, and then modify run to use that as an input. So now we let results equals if config.caseSensitive, and we're going to search. Otherwise, we're going to search case insensitive, but either way we end up with a results object. And now instead of searching directly in our search call, we can do it in that results object. And forgot to include, well, I guess, okay, so now it's saying let case sensitive equal environment variable case insensitive dot is error. So is it an error to retrieve this, I guess? Is it set at all, I would assume. And then we got to go up here, use standard env. How about now? Yes, it worked. Cargo run, and then it tells us how to set it. So it says to search for 2. So let's see how it does it when it's case sensitive. We get 2 lines, TWO, and then if we specify case insensitive equals 1, then we get 4 lines. Neat. What if we give it some weird value like hello? Still. Yeah, so as long as it's set at all is what it's doing. That is error thing. Either way, okay, so I think that's about it for this. Yeah, I think the only thing on this page is they go back to main and they say, instead of print line, eprint line. And that's just saying don't print errors to standard out, print them to standard error. Pretty straightforward. And then that's it for this chapter. So, and yeah, I don't know, hopefully it was helpful. Maybe it was really boring, but I guess if you watched this far, you got something out of it. So thank you for coming along on the journey of what I learned recently about Rust. Have a grand old day.